Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Akiona Law Podcast, wherein we talk about anything and everything that intersects in the areas of family law and divorce. And I am Ululani Akiona, and today we are continuing our four-part series with Meg Gluckman. Meg is a divorce and co-parenting coach. She is also a host of Welcome to the Other Side podcast. Meg specializes in supporting parents, whether they have toddlers, tweens, or 30 somethings, navigate these types of challenging life transitions with grace and resilience. Meg, welcome back.
Thank you, Lani. I'm glad to be back. Glad to be diving into this topic too. This is a really important one.
Yeah, and thank you. Part three, what we're talking about is we're talking about the for those of you who haven't heard the earlier podcast, part one, we were talking about the residential schedule, which is essentially the fancy word for where's your kid going to sleep at night? Number two, we talked about decision making in terms of a parenting plan. And today is number three of this four-part series, which is dispute resolution, conflict resolution in your parenting plan.
Yeah, so good.
So, okay, so thoughts.
Yeah.
Thoughts. How do
So my first thought that I'd love to share with folks is just to recognize that married parents have conflict and non-married parents are going to have conflict. So it's really, really
point?
normal
Good
to
point.
have conflict as parents. Like we have different ideas about how our kids should be raised. And
Right.
what our thought of, quote unquote, what's best for them is can be different whether we're married or whether we're not. So this isn't something that's really unique to uh, divorced parents, but we are required as part of the parenting plan to have a dispute resolution process included in the plan. Um, but just like married parents would do, we're going to work out informally tons of conflict, right?
Right.
We're going to figure out problems left and right, little things about drop-offs and pickups and when things get left behind or should our kid go to this specialist or should our kid go to this summer camp? Like we're going to work out lots and lots of conflicts informally. And the better the skills we have around communication, the more things are going to fall into that bucket of informal conflict resolution before we get into more of a formal process.
And, I just want to make a comment about so the parenting plan, it outlines, different methods about how you're going to resolve these conflicts. Like, for example, we talked about decision making. One example of decision making could be education, and that
Yeah.
can include summer camps. So, what happens if you and your ex disagree about where your child should go to summer camp, or more, I guess I'm going to use a really common example, which is extracurricular activities, sports. Uh, how many sports per season should your child participate? Um, and just especially when a child gets older and a child gets into club sports and that type of intensity and practices, which can then impinge on another parent's time, and maybe the other parent doesn't have the bandwidth or the time to take the child to all of these many practices and games that club sports require. So what do you do when there's a disagreement? And that's when the dispute resolution or conflict resolution kicks into your parenting plan. And there's a couple of methods that people can specify how to resolve disagreements in your parenting plan, such as extracurricular activities. One of them being mediation, the other being arbitration, and the other being counseling. And I'm going to just make a comment really quickly that in terms of the counseling provision, how I often see it utilized as in my collaborative divorce cases as utilizing the parenting coach
Mhm.
to resolve a disagreement, or if you have a child specialist in a case, using that child specialist in lieu of counseling to resolve a disagreement in your parenting plan. Otherwise, in a traditional litigated divorce case, as a family law divorce attorney, I've always gone with the drawback of mediation. Did you have thoughts about that, Meg?
Yeah, just on the co-parent coach
Mhm.
option there, even if you don't do a collaborative
Oh,
case, you can specify that we're going to use a co-parenting coach.
yeah.
And you do have the option of putting a name in there. So if you have worked with someone before, you can put who your primary, your preliminary or your first choice would be um, to work with. But that's just, it's an option. It's out there, as well. Um, I have also seen folks specifically decide that they want to work with a child specialist, which
Hmm.
is,
Right.
like a child psychologist and so forth, if it's something particular to that seems like they would be the right kind of person to help make those decisions. Um, in mediation, I would say probably the vast majority of parenting plans specify mediation as that first dispute resolution process.
Mhm.
If you're unfamiliar with mediation, just to share a little bit, like in
Yeah.
Washington State, you can hire a mediator. There's tons of them. You can hire one who is an attorney and who has mediation training. You can hire
A family law
mediators,
attorney,
a family
family
law
law
attorney. Yes,
divorce attorney.
yes. There's other mediators that have a mental health background but went through a mediation training.
Oh,
Um, and then there's also other mediators that you can work with, especially if you're in a low
yep.
income
Mhm.
situation. That we have dispute resolution centers
Huh?
in almost every county in Washington State, and so you can also go there and
Yeah.
use a mediator who has the standard mediation training, but then also usually there's a specialty in family law or family issues.
Right.
So just to give you a little more background on mediation.
Yeah, to chime in, there's a difference between mediators in terms of when I mentioned the family law divorce attorneys, those are your private mediators. And like, for example, in my litigated family law and divorce cases, after we go through your temporary orders hearing, and the next step that we utilize to finalize a divorce case short of going to trial is mediation. And in that type of typical scenario, each side is represented by attorneys and they agree to use a private mediator, often a family law divorce attorney who has practiced. Usually the mediators I use are those who practice for like 20 plus years because they really know their stuff. Otherwise, I do have a client that it's because the other side, his baby's mama, is unrepresented, he is going to save his money on fees. He and her are going to utilize that dispute resolution center to see if they can try and reach an agreement on their own, because
Oh,
that way he doesn't have to pay me for my time. He doesn't to be there at mediation. He doesn't have to pay for a private mediator because, as you mentioned, in terms of the dispute resolution centers, you don't have to pay those mediators an hourly fee. You pay them that mediation fee that they charge, and then you're good to go. And usually the mediation it's from 9 to 12, 9 a.m. to
there you
12.
go.
So, well, because
Yeah,
we're just emailing about today.
that's awesome.
I was like,
That's awesome.
hey, I can be available if you have questions. And yeah, that's something that, think about as well. Where I don't, honestly, I don't think they're going to be able to reach agreement, but who knows? Who knows?
Hmm.
You never
Hmm.
know. What can
Right.
happen?
I mean, and that's important to just like point out, even though it's probably pretty obvious to folks, the reason to use the dispute resolution process, right, is to reach an agreement.
Right.
right? That is what you're trying to get to. And being able to go into those mediations or working with a co-parenting coach, um, and bringing a creative, open mind to
Yeah.
those conversations as much as possible to find a solution, right? Like being willing to go in and say, I don't know how this might turn out, right? We're feeling like we're in polar opposites of this issue right now, but maybe there's a third way. Maybe there's something we haven't thought of that somebody can help us get to, because that's the purpose of it, right?
Right. Having that. So mediators are objective, neutral third parties, and so they don't have any skin in the game, so to speak. So it is nice to have that fresh set of eyes because your attorney is aligned with you. They're your advocate, and sometimes it's hard to kind of step away and not advocate. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
you need that neutral third party. And just to also clarify, mediators cannot make decisions about a case. They cannot, they're not there to say who's right and who's wrong, and this is what's going to happen. A mediator is strictly there to help parties reach compromise, reach an agreement, and hopefully, the whole goal of reaching this agreement is so that you can be done and you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
resolve your case any further in court, which the next step after mediation would be trial.
Yeah, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Lonnie. Like, are there times when you can use arbitration instead of going to trial?
Hey, you know what? That's a really good question, Meg. I've done this before where man, this is what I love doing to do. I've done this in
Yeah.
cases where, so let's say we're mediating a divorce or a parenting plan or child support, and we reached agreement on the parenting plan,
Mm-hmm.
yet we don't agree on child support. So the
Okay.
next step then is that with agreement between myself and the other parent's attorney, we tell the mediator, hey, now that you spent like 10 hours with us all
Mm-hmm.
day and you've heard the issues about the child support, can you now arbitrate the child support dispute?
Mm.
And I love doing that piece because then you've already have someone, again, that's been with us for like 10 hours, has heard everything, understands the issue. And because it is a family law divorce attorney who, like I said, has like 20 plus years of experience, they're pretty knowledgeable. And so I prefer using that person to help me make a decision rather than my client spending all this time and money for trial and hearing this issue before a judge. And a lot of time when the matters go before judges, they're former prosecutors or public defenders, and they don't understand family law issues as well as a mediator who was practicing family law for 20 plus years.
Mm.
That's what I like to do in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
short-cutting
Could you
things.
maybe for the audience, if arbitrator is kind of a unfamiliar word,
Oh, yeah.
do you want to kind of define what the difference is and what would shift? Like how could you go from being a mediator to an arbitrator?
That's a good point. Well, so again, so like one of the shifts, right? We talked about the mediator being someone who's neutral, unobjective, and they don't make decisions. Well,
Mm-hmm.
when they shift to an arbitrator, they're essentially making a decision. They have the power and authority to make a decision just as a jurist, just as a family law judge or family law
Mm-hmm.
court commissioner would be able to make a decision. And
Mm-hmm.
the next step would be is that myself and my counterpart attorney would agree that that arbitrator's decision is binding,
Mm-hmm.
meaning the parties are bound and have to follow what this person decides, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have the arbitrator hear everything and then maybe I submit additional writings, declarations in support of the issue. The arbitrator issues a decision, and then typically the statute allows that decision to be in a party to have it put before the court again.
Mm. I
So
see.
then we say, no,
So
it's binding.
yeah,
No going back to the
right.
court.
Right. And when you say that you and the other attorney agree to now have the mediator
Binding.
arbitrate,
Yep.
right? It's actually not, I mean, the two of you are proposing it to your clients and your clients are agreeing to
Yes.
to do arbitration versus going to court, right? So in
Versus
the
going to
end
court.
it still is the clients deciding, yes, we want this person who had been mediating for us now to arbitrate this last decision because we don't want to go to court.
Right. And essentially arbitration is short for an informal hearing that results in the decision.
Mhm.
And again, like as you mentioned, the parties will then agree that the mediator can then shift from a neutral person to a person who has authority to make a decision.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing that out. One thing I wanted to segue and switch gears on is that, I do family law divorce mediations, and it's funny to kind of shift from, okay, first of all, I apologize to the family law attorneys that I've used as mediators for any, for me getting riled up during my family law mediations, because man, now that I've mediated cases, it's like, woo,
Hard work. It's hard work for
it is
sure.
hard work. It is hard work, but it is also very exciting. I swear
Mhm.
it is so exciting to help parties reach compromise and come up with that solution
Yes.
and just
Yeah.
kind of just brainstorm. I mean, I love it. It's so
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and as a coach, I mean, I also love, helping folks come up with these solutions that they just like weren't even on their radar,
Yeah.
right? And like I'll give you a really simple one. Well, I don't know that it's simple, but a conflict when we have one parent who wants one kind of residential schedule, say, and one parent that wants a different residential schedule. So say the first one um, wants to go 1 week on, 1 week off, and the other person, wants, to split the weeks some way so that they're never a full week on, a full week off, right? And there's been multiple times when I have brought forth the idea of, well, what if we did week on, week off during the summer? And we
Hmm.
stuck to this other schedule during the school year, right? And their eyes just kind of like bug out of their head, like,
Oh,
wait a second, that's an option,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
or sounds like because of the age of the kids, you're not ready to do week on, week off, right? What if we waited two
Right.
years
Hmm.
and then we started that? Wait, that's an option, right?
Yeah.
It's just like sometimes we get so stuck in just kind of a black or white or binary or, thinking it has
Yeah.
to be a certain way and
Right.
just bringing in a neutral third party who might have some different perspectives or, can ask some different questions, um, can really shift everything. So I think it's important to just hold for ourselves that if we get to a point of needing,
Hmm.
some conflict resolution support or
Right.
dispute resolution support, it's not a failure on our parts. Like we are just
Right.
the next thing that we need to do and we're just continuing to co-parent together and move forward, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And and again, I think like there is something to be said about that dynamic is that when you're in that, and because
Mhm.
it takes a lot out of you energetically, it is sometimes, and you can get kind of stuck in tunnel vision, and it's hard to see the forest through the trees. And I personally love the fact that in terms of the way our court system here in Washington operates, that a lot of times if you've got a disagreement about extracurricular activities, you're required to do mediation before you bring that to court.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And part of that, just like you're saying, right? It's because the court wants to save families time and money going
Mhm.
to court, but also because the court is busy enough as it is, right? And it doesn't want to really decide whether or not Timmy should do sleepaway soccer camp this year or not, right? Like
Right.
we got a lot of other big things that we've got to
Yeah.
decide. So, um, that's the idea is like, let's try these other methods of resolving conflict before bringing it all the way to the court.
Should we talk about when mediation is not required in a family law divorce case? I feel like we should do
Mm,
that.
yeah, go for it. You
Okay.
lead on it.
Oh, okay. So I think one thing we need to point out that there are situations where, let's say, if you've got a family law restraining order in effect or any type of domestic violence protection order, mediation, you are not required to go to mediation in that instance. Your parenting plan can say, because there is a restraining order, domestic violence protection order in effect, you can bypass the mediation and go back to court, because a lot of times, right, there's that power imbalance, and there's no sense that it's hard for a person not to kind of give into that. We want to protect that person from that course of control that dominated that relationship between the I want to say the abuser and the survivor.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out.
Now, but at the same, I do want to point out too. Now, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've also done mediation with my clients when there was a domestic violence or protection order in effect, because it was still cheaper for my client to go to court because we were on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So my client didn't have to worry about, leaving the building when that person is there or running to the person
Mm-hmm.
in the hallway. You really are, you're in separate breakout rooms, and the media just goes back and forth between the breakout rooms. So in that sense, there is a safe space for my client
Mm-hmm.
to participate in mediation with me there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really is a prerequisite to be able to participate in mediation is that both parties feel safe,
Yeah.
right? And I have heard examples of if there is a meeting in person, right? Again, being able to use two separate rooms
Mhm.
where the mediator is going back and forth. We call it shuttle mediation, where they're shuttling
Right.
between like two rooms, whether Zoom rooms or actual different conference rooms. And then also, protection mechanisms so that um, say the person who has been abused, comes to the session 15 minutes after the other person has
Right.
already arrived and leaves 15 minutes before the other person and has um, a friend or a family member, somebody who's kind of a companion with them, who might be waiting for them in the lobby, like that kind of stuff to make sure folks feel safe. Yeah,
Yeah.
very important.
Have you done that in terms of your parenting coaching, where maybe there was an extremely like volatile issue, or maybe something happened where you didn't have them together, I guess, in the same space, so you're kind of going back and forth?
No, because
Okay.
I really don't do
Okay.
high conflict
Oh,
um, mediation in that way. So my role would more be around supporting one of the parties as they're preparing for their
okay.
mediation,
Ah.
um, and helping them get into the best kind of mental state possible to feel grounded and calm as they go
Mhm.
into it. And that actually, just if I can make a little plug for myself, like I
Oh,
have
yeah. Well, let me ask you this.
yeah, go ahead.
Meg, how do you support someone
Hmm.
as a divorce coach through mediation? Tell us your process.
Yeah,
What do you do?
well, the resource I wanted to share
Okay.
that I have up on my website is called 5 Questions to Help You Prepare for Any Divorce Meeting. So whether it's mediation or just
Okay.
meeting with your attorney. And so these are 5 questions that I have all of my clients when they're feeling anxious or stressed
Okay.
about going into a meeting, like a
Okay.
mediation. I have them work through these 5 questions where they're really identifying like what am I afraid of? What am I worried the other person might say during
Okay.
this mediation, right? So we
Mhm.
just like we take the steam out of any words that you think might really be hurtful or scary to hear the other person say, right? We just kind of predict it. We expect those words to show up, and then we figure out, okay, how do I want to respond or not respond? How do I want to,
Mm-hmm.
take care of my nervous system if the other person does say those words? And then we really look for, where do I have control? Where do I have agency in this process? Right? So what are the issues that I want to raise?
Ah, okay.
Right? What information do I want to make sure I get? What questions do I want to ask? What will make this a success for me, no
Mm.
matter how the other person shows up?
Oh,
Right? So like,
wow.
how can I feel like this was a successful use of my time and resources and energy, no matter how the other person shows up, because I can't control them, right?
Yeah.
So for a
Yeah.
lot of my clients, they will say, well, here's the information I want to be able to get out of this process, right? Or this meeting.
Okay.
Or I just really want to practice saying out loud what I really want. For a lot of
Okay.
people, a lot of parents, like, they haven't actually, like, they haven't articulated what's really important to them, and for them to just say that
Sure.
out loud in a meeting is really, it's really big, right? Um, yeah, so we try to just figure out what is in your control as you go into this meeting, and make sure they have a good understanding, depending on what kind of meeting it is, right? Is it a mediation, or are they doing the collaborative process and they're having a full team meeting? Help them understand what to expect in each of those meetings. Yeah.
Can you summarize your questions again, just really
Mm,
quickly?
I
Yeah.
set them in a random order. So,
Okay.
let's see if I can summarize them again. Um,
Well, just state
so
them.
yeah, so like, what are you worried about going into
You
this
worry about.
meeting? Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What are you afraid the other person might say?
Okay. What are you afraid that the person might say?
Yeah. What do you want to do if they say that? And we kind of like go down, and there's a
Okay.
few like follow-up questions about um, like down that rabbit hole of, if they say that, what do you want to do? How do you want to feel? Sometimes
Okay.
it's just like, I just want to take a deep breath.
How do you want to
And
respond?
yeah,
Yeah.
how do you want to respond? It might not be actually a response, right? It
Right.
might
Right.
just be, okay, I'm just going to let it
Agreed.
land, and I'm
Yeah.
going to doodle on my paper for a minute, because I'm just like, I'm not responding, right? Um, what do you want to get out of the meeting,
What do you want to get out of the meeting? Okay.
right? And then what will make this meeting a success?
We'll make this meeting a success. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. You know, one thing that I think I was listening to, somebody said this. Oh, I know. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I remember it was a podcast I was listening to. And part of like, how do you want to respond? Like, I want to go back and touch upon what you said, because a response doesn't necessarily have to be a verbal response, like you mentioned.
No.
It could be like, all right, I heard about this is what I heard. Okay, so I hear it. I recognize it. How does that make me feel? Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
I feel a little bit irritated. Ooh, I feel a little bit skeptical. Ooh, I feel a little
Yeah.
bit annoyed.
Yeah.
Okay, you know
Yeah.
what? I recognize that feeling, and I'm going to let it go. I'm just
Yeah.
going to lift it, let it drift down the river.
There you go.
Let
Let
it
it
flow
float
down.
away. Yeah. Yeah. And here's an example. A lot of folks are afraid of kind of grand statements that the other person might make, right? Like, I'm never paying child support, or I want full custody,
Yeah,
or you're a horrible parent, or
yeah.
because you never feed them broccoli, you don't deserve to have them ever at
Fine.
your house,
I've heard.
um, or I'm keeping the house, or you're not getting a
Yeah.
penny of retirement, like
Or
any
you're
of
not
those,
getting a penny of spousal maintenance, even though
or yeah,
you
spousal
stayed at
support,
home
right,
for like 24 years taking care of the kids.
right, right. So there's like all these
Yeah,
grandiose statements,
right.
and what I really emphasize is like, okay, let's expect
Let's
that the other
expect that.
person is going to say those words, right? And
Yeah.
what we are going to differentiate between is them saying those words
Uh-huh.
and the final outcome of this whole process,
Okay.
right? They say those words.
Uh-huh.
That does not automatically mean it's the final outcome,
Oh.
right? They
Fine.
say,
Yeah.
right, I'm keeping the house,
I'm keeping that.
and you're not settled on that. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that's the final outcome by any means, right? And when you're working with good professionals, they know that,
Right.
right? They know that there's going to be grandiose statements sometimes at the beginning of the process, and we're still going to work through the process, whether it's a mediator, whether it's divorce attorneys, a divorce coach, a financial neutral. Like they're like, yep, you can say whatever you want at the beginning of the process, and we're still going to work through the process to get to our final agreement, right? So
Yeah.
differentiating between those grandiose words, well, yep, those are words that were said, and we still have a whole process to work through to get there.
And it's really interesting. I think what I mean, like in terms of that really big picture concept of mediation, when someone makes a grandiose statement in a way those are positions.
Hmm.
People come in mediation and they state their position. And what I like to do in terms of when I'm mediating cases, I like to get behind the positions and get to know these
Yes.
values.
Yeah. Yeah.
Values, what is your goal? And I think that kind of comes in hand with the whole collaborative divorce process and what's your high end goal here. Like
Hmm.
we're moving beyond a position where I want spousal maintenance of $3,000 for the next 10 years. That's like a position. And then we need to get behind it and figure out what's your goal here?
Yep.
What's your value behind this? And
Yeah.
really when you kind of dig a little bit deeper, then you find out a lot of times there's an underlying fear. Well,
That's it.
yeah.
That's it, right? It's
Yeah.
the goals, it's the values, and it's the
Yeah.
fears,
Right.
right? And nobody leads when you're hearing the grandiose statements, nobody's leading with their fear, right? But that's underneath it all.
That's underneath it
Underneath it
all.
all. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Ah.
So good.
So good stuff. Trying to get behind those fears, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to kids.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Losing
And that's
time. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. It's the big stuff, right? It's the big heart stuff that's in there. Yeah. And
Yeah.
what it means about you, I mean, that's what is, sharing custody or, a certain kind of residential schedule. What does it mean about you? What do you make it mean about you? Yeah. There's a lot of deep identity work that's hidden in this process. Yeah.
Yeah. And what would you tell someone who is, because again, we're going to go back to the example of the kids,
Mm-hmm.
the residential schedule, right? Where a lot of times, people come in all the time with positions like, I want a 50-50 parenting plan. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say if you were representing the party, and let's just say it's a mom, and let's just say it's a mom that wants a 50-50 parenting plan, but let's just say because of the mom's work schedule, or let's say dad has more free time. Let's say dad has more free time to take the kids to be involved in extracurricular activities. Let's say dad is the one helping the kids with the homework. We're not here to say that mom is not helping, but she's just operating a different aspect because
Mm-hmm.
let's just say she's busy working. And the mom is saying, "Well, I want 50-50."
Mm-hmm.
What would you like, how would you coach the mom that aspect going into mediation? Do I make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a few different angles to it,
Okay.
right? So there's a very practical angle of like, okay, what would this actually look like? Right? So if you can't be there, after school with the kids, what is your vision of what the kids would be doing? Right? So it's like getting into some of the practicalities of what does that actually look like.
Mhm.
And then I like to, of course, go to the deeper level of,
Mhm.
so let's say it's a 60-40 or it's a 70-30 kind of parenting plan. What do you
Mhm.
think that means about you as a parent, right? What kind of parent, you know, is the 30 on a 70-30,
So
right?
is
So
it
like
is a
getting to their assumptions or their judgments about what that means about that parent.
okay, so let's play this out. Let's say is a 70-30 where parent has every other weekend?
I don't know what the exact schedule would look like, but
Okay. So let's
sure.
just say it's like an every other weekend parenting plan, right? And so you have like mom and, husband and wife, mom and dad, whatever. It could be anyone, two
Mhm.
partners separating. And so they're going from this two household, seeing the kids all the time,
Yeah.
where again, going back to the mom, now the mom is looking at every other week for whatever reasons. Um, so okay, so let's just say too, even let's say a guardian litem came on board the case, and the guardian litem was like, okay, hey mom, given the fact, the age of your kid, and what the kid needs for school or whatever, dad's gonna
Mhm.
have full time, and you mom are gonna have every other weekend. So your question is, what does that mean to you as a mom if you don't have that 50-50 anymore? You have every
Yeah.
weekend. And to me as a parent, I would be like, well, I think that means then that I'm a shitty parent.
Mhm.
I'm less than.
Right.
I don't
Right.
care about my
And
kid.
that's yeah. And then that's our work to do,
Yeah.
right? To recognize that I can still be an amazing parent no matter how much time I have with my kid.
That's
And I
hard.
get to decide. It's not easy.
It's
No,
hard.
nobody said it was easy, right? And yeah, I mean, just really deciding for ourselves. I get to decide what I'm going to make all of this mean.
Mm,
I get to decide what my relationship with my kid looks like,
mm. Yeah,
right? It's
that's
coming back to like finding where our control is. And our control is around the thoughts that we have about ourselves and about our relationship with our kid or kids. Yeah.
you know what too, and I am an advocate for this. If you can, because your insurance allows you to seek mental health counseling, I do
Mhm.
encourage people to go through that because it really does, because you're in grief. You're
Yeah,
losing a
completely.
relationship, and it doesn't matter if you wanted a divorce or not. You're still grieving the loss of this relationship, the loss of a dream. And then if you once you separate and you move on your own, and you're the parent who sees the kids less, you're grieving
Mhm.
the loss of that relationship with your children as well.
Absolutely.
So you
Absolutely.
and it's a lot cheaper to see a therapist, especially if your insurance can cover it, than paying your attorney's hourly rate. And in fact, even if you had to pay 200 bucks for an hour therapy session, that's a lot cheaper than
Yeah.
bitching and I'm not going to say bitching about using
No,
your
but
attorney as a
yeah.
counselor.
Yeah. And that's not what your attorney is trained to
Therefore,
do
yeah,
anyway, right?
yeah,
And I think, I mean, you just nailed it. There's so much grief here.
yeah,
There's grief about the vision that you had for the
right,
future. There's grief about your identity,
yeah.
right? There's grief about people that aren't in your life as much
Mhm.
as you want them to be in your life.
As I thought it would be. Right.
There's so much,
So much
right? And
grief.
it's a process to move through. And
It is.
sometimes what we do instead of dealing with the grief
Mhm.
is we get in more conflict,
Ah,
right?
yeah,
And so
yeah.
the more that we can give ourselves time and space to be with the grief and work through it, we actually end up in less conflict.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you said it right there. Mic drop.
Yeah.
Mic drop. And you've been through that.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and I'm going through a high conflict divorce, and I'm
Mhm.
going through it. And yeah, it's a lot. We hear you folks.
Mhm.
We know it's not easy, but see, outside resources as well, in addition to your attorney, is
Mhm.
huge.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think as hard as it is really, really important to also just take a real long-term perspective,
Long
right?
term.
Like you are
Gosh.
going to have a relationship with your child for the rest of their life, for the rest of your life, right? So, um, keep in mind, what do I want it to be like when they're, in their early 20s? What do I
Yeah,
want my relationship to be like when they're in their early 30s and 40s and
right,
50? Like I I still like I may have less control right now,
right. I hear that.
but long term, how do I keep that door open? How do I
Yeah.
nurture this relationship so that it gets to develop into whatever beautiful thing it is going to develop into?
Um, I hear you on that 100% because even right now too, right? I'm looking right
Mhm.
now. This is just about this period in time that I'm going through is such a small blip
Yeah.
in terms of my relationship with my child that there is a part of like I've got to look past that and see that big picture and look long term.
Mhm.
Um, because my end, my big high end goal, my values to have a
Mhm.
healthy, harmonious, and happy relationship with my
Mhm.
child.
Mhm.
And if that means for a little bit that I
Mhm.
have to let go and give him what he needs, even though it conflicts with my rights and expectations as a parent, I've got to see that big picture
Yeah.
because it's about having a happy and healthy and harmonious relationship with my child. And this is just but a small little blip, a small little
Mhm.
what's below a speed bump. A small
I don't
little,
know. Yeah.
small little
Yeah.
bump in the sidewalk over the
Yeah.
it's a small
Yeah.
little bump as
Yeah.
I'm walking along the sidewalk of life and my relationship with my
Yeah.
child.
Yeah. That's so good. So good.
Uh, oh my gosh. Well, I think I think we talked a lot about dispute resolution. Did you
We got it.
any other thoughts that you wanted to say about it?
No, I think I guess I would just say that what you put in your parenting plan is, the last resort, and that's what it's there
Mhm.
for, right? If
Yeah.
nothing else works out, most of your conflicts, you're not going to use that dispute resolution process. You're going to work them out yourselves. But it's good to have it there. So that's kind of your backstop if you ever need it.
That's a good point. A lot of times the things you put in your parenting plan are in a way, so what happens if we can't resolve this on our own? Then your
Hmm.
default is your parenting plan.
Yep.
So, thank you so much, Meg. Wow, we really kind of we really went into this and beyond, which I think is just fabulous and amazing. And that's why we're doing this four-part series.
Yeah. Great.
And so join us next time, folks, as myself and Meg Gluckman dive into the last big section of the parenting plan that we want to talk about, which is called Section 14, Other. And others usually those miscellaneous types of provision, um, co-parenting sections
Hmm.
that we put in that may not necessarily be enforceable, but are good signposts, guidelines, reminders about what co-parenting looks like. So join us until then and make how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. Come visit me. Check out my website. It's just my name, Meg Gluckman, GLUCKMAN.com. And you can download those 5 questions that I mentioned earlier there too.
Okay, great, fantastic. And again, until next time, this is Ululani Akiona of the Akiona Law, Family Law and Divorce Podcast, wherein we talk about anything and everything that relates, intersects in the areas of family law and divorce. Until next time, be well. The information in this podcast is general advice only and should not in any respect be relied on as specific legal advice.